Mobile hunters, the king of comfort has arrived. Go to tetherednation.com and check out the new Lockdown saddle. Over the past 2 years, Tethered has tested and refined a new approach to their saddle lineup. The Lockdown saddle takes the best-in-class features from the Phantom, like the UtiliBridge, comfort channels, and included an expandable saddle body with their Lockdown link construction to take saddle hunting to the next level of comfort. As if this wasn't enough, they developed Lockdown haulers, which has a slightly rigid internal frame structure, so you can easily unzip, zip, and access haulers with one hand. And if you're a guy like me with no junk in your trunk and have issues with your saddle staying put while you're walking in to hunt, the Lockdown modular yoke solves this problem. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old tree climbing veteran, go to tetherednation.com for all your saddle hunting gear. All right, folks, we are back with another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today we're going to do things a little different. I got a lipper in today. Right here. Not really. I'm coming off the flu, so I'm going to try not to chomp my, what is this thing called? A lozenger? Cough drop?
Yeah, we'll call it that.
Yeah. I'm chewing one of these. I'm going to try not to clank it on my teeth and chew on it because I do like to chew these up and annoy the crap out of you guys with it. I'm going to try to keep it clean, but otherwise I will have a coughing fit. But if you're watching the video, you will recognize the sexy beast on the other side of me here, Mr. Aaron Hepler. What's going on, brother?
What's up, dude? It's good to be back on.
I know, man. It has been a little while. But I was saying, getting ready to say, we're going to do things a little bit different today because we're going to do a little catch up. Like we need to do because we talk often, but we haven't been on the show in a while. And then we're going to transition things over, and Aaron's actually going to interview me, which is different from me. I'm going to ride co-pilot on this one and talk about my hunt, the buck I killed, and so on and so forth, which I hate talking about myself on my own show. It's a weird thing. I don't mind going on other people's shows and doing it.
It's not. Today there's a guest host, so this is not your show today.
That's right. There's a guest host. But before we go over to guest host duties, what's going on, man? How you been? How's your season shaking out?
Good, man. It's I've gotten out a couple times. Yesterday was actually a good day. One of my buddies, I sent you some pictures. He killed a public buck, but that's his first buck in 5 years. So he was pretty stoked. He was not about to be picky this year. It's probably a 2-year-old based on body size. Not a very big rack, but he really didn't care, and I didn't either. It was a good time. But
that's awesome.
Actually had some buck encounters yesterday, and they're cruising, man. It's that time of year, and this week is kind of, I think, probably put to not to a dead stop, but the heat is going to be a big factor, I think. But next week looks good. So
yeah, the weather looks like it's getting right going into next week. Early part of this week was really good too. If you were on them, and which you had some good encounters because the temps were right at the beginning of the week. I have a hard time saying that now because I was joking with I was texting with Jared Scheffler, and he and I were joking because he hates cold fronts, like hates them. Yeah. And so I was joking with him. I was like, hey, man, I was like, I'm getting ready to leave for Kansas, looking for that first cold front when I get out there, just, digging, not the knife, but, like poking at him a little bit. He's like, the only front you should be looking for is the warm one on the back end of that thing, but it made me kind of think about it because I was like, I do notice that when I go to Kansas that on the more mild weather days, I typically do see more deer. Like not like necessarily hot days necessarily, like, right. But he's hunted it way more than I have, obviously. Yeah. And so I've never talked to him about like if it's like the hotter the better, because there probably is like a point where it's just like it's too much. You know what I mean? Because of course they don't have squat for shade out there either, so it's not like they can just like dip off into the timber and like get out of the heat.
Right.
But I do think that like out there for whatever reason, like I do see more deer on more mild days. But I think also it might be a little perception too, because like you're using so much more visual. So you're like, you typically can see a lot of deer move. Right. And so on those like colder days, maybe they aren't moving quite as far or whatever.
Sure.
Wearing the timber, it's like you could be 30 yards from them, depending on how thick it is, and you're just out of the game and you don't see them anyway, And if it makes that deer get up and move an extra 50 yards that day, a half hour earlier or whatever, then it's like all of a sudden it seems like a really good day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I was thinking about that. If it has any, I was just thinking like if it has any more impact, like regionally, like for like if you're in timber, East versus, Midwest or like plain states. I was just thinking about that. There might be a difference in that. But what were you going to say? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Well, I don't disagree. Like we actually, I haven't really had anything much for cameras, but honestly, I put out less cameras this year, kind of on purpose, just because I know the area I wanted to put cameras out the most, and then I kind of lost time to go put out cameras in areas that I wanted to get to. But the area that I killed last year, actually, we had that first cold front like the 7th, 8th of October, I think. It was over a weekend, and there was like a lot of rain. It got real cold. And then we actually had a lot of daylight pictures the day after that all went through. So, it wasn't a warm day, but it was warmer than the last two. I wouldn't disagree. I think it's probably, the way fronts work is that it's good on the front end of a front and the back end of a front. And I don't really think if it matters one way or the other, if it's cold or if it's warm. I think that the change is really the determining factor on deer movement.
Yeah, and I think it's also, again, this is just my experience out there, and maybe even here if I think about it real hard, but if you get like a way drastic, like to the extreme change, right? People like that. But for me, what I've seen, at least like in Kansas, because I've hunted some like I said, most of the deer that I've seen were on like milder weather days where it's like it might have been slightly lower than seasonal norm or slightly higher than seasonal norm, right? So it's like anywhere from like 55 to like 65 for like the high or whatever, you know what I mean? Like that seems to be like, for me, at least out there, the times I've been, it's been like the sweet spot, right? But I've also hunted days where like the high with like the wind chill and stuff was like -12. I didn't see shit those days. Right. You know what I mean? And I was out I was out all day, multiple days, and like consecutive days where we just had like -degree temperatures. Same thing when I was in Iowa. We had a couple of days in a row of like, it was probably better part of a week where we were like in the below freezing, in the negatives some days. And I didn't see squat those days. And it was like the more mild days I was seeing deer. And I think the opposite's true. It's like if you get a big swing where it gets real hot, then it's probably not great either,
Yeah, well, it's been pretty, I would say, mild the last couple of days, and today was just about 80 here, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Tomorrow's going to be 80 as well. The whole next couple of days are going to be in the 80s. High 70s, low 80s.
Yeah. So what's your plan here as we're getting into prime time there, buddy?
Well, I found that. Did I send you that pic? Oh, I just sent it just
the wide
a little
one?
bit ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
I found that deer, and he's. What is that? 15 minutes maybe before daylight on that picture, and I had him 2 weeks ago at like 5 a.m. and I only checked those two cameras because my buddy that hunts with me actually ended up going past it once when he was hunting, and then when we were packing his deer out yesterday, we went past it again, and it's kind of like it's a cruising area, but he's definitely like that picture that I just sent, like he's definitely heading towards a bedding area that I found a couple of years ago. So I might just throw all my eggs in one basket and kind of go after him. But I think the good thing about that area is like I have plenty of other, like, I'm not super picky. I'm really not picky this year at all, but time wise, but there are quite a few deer that are like, anywhere from 100 to 120 inches there. So, and I think not only based on the direction he's going to bed, but he's kind of using that to cruise back to his bed, and a lot of other bucks do too. So I think it wouldn't be a bad plan, because my primary area has a lot more pressure this year than it has in the past. And I think it's kind of drawn some attention because they're doing a lot of new cutting. I think really throughout the state, they're doing more cutting, more burning, and people are really learning like, oh, cuts aren't, I think back in not very long ago, cuts were like, oh, they ruined my hunting spot. They cut the woods down, and it's like now they're like, oh, that's good. So, so I think just based on that, it just brought more people, and you know, I've run into a couple people in some easy to hunt spots, but they're still not really. They're not hunting it the way I would hunt it, so it's still possible. I think this just the activity has been lower as far as daylight stuff goes in that area. So,
right. Yeah, I know. I know even early in the season, like you were, you know, noticing that there were people there, so it wasn't like it all of a sudden just picked up, you know, as we got into late November. Like there were some folks that were kind of in and around some of the spots you had spent some time in, and that's just kind of the way it goes, right, man? It's like when you find a good spot, you know, or a good area, you know, it's just a matter of time until someone runs across it, you know. You know,
yeah, I actually told my buddy last year, I was like, dude, we got like 3 years to hunt this place, and then we're not going to be by ourselves out. Like or they're going to find it. And I think I podcasted with Josh Rayleigh like 2 or 3 days after the first day. And I was like, dude, I walked in, I got in early. I think it was like, you know, 1:00 by the time I got back to where I wanted to hunt. And I was like taking my time getting into this setup so I wouldn't, because I know there's a buck that's bedded not far from where I was going to hunt. And I was like, I don't want to bump him out. And I started climbing the tree. Like I got in real good, and I heard people talking, but there's a recreational trail or like a service road not very far away. And I was kind of like, I heard people talking, and I thought it was somebody on the service road. And I started climbing my tree, and some guy was like, hey, yo. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? And I was up 2 sticks already. Like all my stuff's unpacked, and I'm like, are you serious? Like, all right, whatever. So I packed my stuff up, and I'm like, I had a backup plan, because I always do when you go out there.
Right.
And I could have gone back the way I came, but if I went back the way I came, I would have blown out the whole. It would mess things up. So I kind of like walked back to the service road, and I'm like, the guy was like, hey, there's somebody else down that trail. I'm like, okay, thanks. Like, I was mildly rude. Because I was a little irritated that he let me get halfway up the tree.
Before he said anything, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I heard you talking, but I couldn't see you, because they were set up good. There were 2 guys in the tree, but they had like, there was leaf cover, right? So I just couldn't see them. And, I don't know if they could see me, but if they could, and if this is you, I'm sorry for being rude. Next time, freaking tell me before.
Right. Don't let me get all set up and be like, hey, buddy, I'm over here.
And
I watched you set up.
Yeah. Email Clint. Don't email me.
Yeah. Email me, or, you know, be that guy that leaves a shitty comment on YouTube or something, you know. So I got a lot of those. You just join the club. That's awesome, man. Well, I have no doubt
I hope you killed something.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're going to have a good week this coming week, man, because I think things are looking to get right, as far as, like, you know, the weather looks promising, at least, you know, and so that should be
the only day that
should be good.
I'm not going to go tomorrow, but the only day I can't go is next Thursday, so I'll be hunting all week next week.
And you have that middle, like being able to hunt during the week, which is just like, you know, there aren't many game changers in the hunting world, like products, right? I hate that word, game changer. But the true game changer is being able to hunt during the week. That's the ticket.
Yeah,
you know,
it is funny, and it's fun. It's nice when you go and there's nobody in the parking lot, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But with that, I think we're going to go ahead and transition, man, and we're going to go ahead and hand this beast over to make this the Aaron Hepler show, and he is going to be the host, and I'm going to now relinquish my reins and be the co-host. And be on the easy side of this thing for a change.
On the easy side of the thing. So if we should redo the intro too, right? Should we redo the intro? I feel like
if you want to do your own intro, man, go ahead. Just hit it up.
All right. So let's we got to think about this though. Today we're doing something different on the show, guys. The man with 2 black eyes and so many stories to tell about it. The MC of MCs, the kayaking killer, Mr.
The
Clint Campbell.
Killer. The kayaking killer. Yeah. We add one more K to that thing, we're in trouble, dude. You know what I'm saying? Like, we gotta take her easy here. We're on a family-friendly network over here, you know. Awesome. Hey, I appreciate you having me on the show. I've been a long-time listener.
I appreciate you coming on, man. You know,
yeah,
we get a lot of comments like, "Could you please have Clint on?" We really miss.
I bet we do.
There's shitty awesome YouTube comments.
Right, exactly.
So what do you got going on, man? Like you had you got out a lot early part of the season. I would say for you.
Well, for me, yeah, just based on what I had going on, like I couldn't get out during the September timeframe that I usually like to get out. But honestly, I didn't have any players that time of year. Usually that's kind of like I do more scouting during that time to see if I can pick something up, you know, real quick that I can make a play on. And I don't dive into any of the areas that I feel real good about, like historically or even like from postseason scouting. There was one spot that I really wanted to get to because I had the right crop rotation this year for that spot, and it's not. Mm-hmm. And I never have a spot that has any crops, you know. And so this place was like kind of close to like a piece of public that I could hunt. Yeah. And so I wanted to try to make a play at that. I had glassed it a bunch, and I saw one doe in it one evening, but it just kind of felt like it could be good. I planned to hang a camera in there, and I just never got around to it. And then, you know, things happened where I just had some personal stuff I had to do between, you know, family stuff and just like things that I wanted to do before hunting season got started. So I really just never got to get out in September. So I didn't really kick off my season until like the state opener, really. And I had made the plan in the offseason. I mean, you and I talked about it where I really wanted to make it to the North Piece as often as I could this year because, you know, it was just like I wanted to really try to put in some hunts on that this year. And so the first 2 weekends, you know, and it rained like every weekend too. So like that was kind of like another pisser. I was able to get out to the North Piece. Yeah, literally. I was able to get out there twice. The first hunt was like I just did a lot of scouting and camera checking that day, and there was a really good deer that I thought maybe I had a sense of what he might do. Found some fresh sign and stuff like that, and like an idiot, like I walked away from the fresh sign and went and set up in a spot that I really wanted to set up in because the wind was right for it, and I never hunted this particular area before, and so I hunted that, didn't see anything. The following weekend, that storm kind of rolled through, and it rained all weekend, but like the rain was going to end around 1 o'clock. It was supposed to end around noon, but it ended up like running longer. And so I sat in my truck, like at the area that I park, and waited for the rain to kind of almost stop to where I was watching the radar and had about a half hour, and I jumped out and got into a tree and saw a couple of deer that night on the North Piece. And then coming out, I saw a real good buck in this one cut that's in this area. And it was windy enough that like had I seen him quickly enough, I just screwed it up because I knew I was probably going to see deer in this area on the way out, and I just didn't pay attention. I was walking up along it, and my plan was I literally said to myself as I was walking out, I was like, I need to creep along this edge. I was like, because if I see a deer that's close enough to the edge, it's like I might be able to make a stalk on it because it's just windy enough, you know. And I was like, and then as I'm walking up to it, I'm daydreaming, thinking about like the next weekend, like the next hunt, where I might hunt or like what I might do or whatever. And I'm also thinking to myself, like, what are the chances there's going to be a deer close enough for me to stalk anyway? Like right. It's like a pipe dream. And so I walk up and I get to this cut and there's like some tall like grass. And I just happened to look to my right and there's a deer standing there, like a buck at 30 yards, you know? And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so I hopped down real quick and I clipped on and had an arrow. And in hindsight, I was talking to Greg Litzinger about this. In hindsight, when I should have just stood and drew because I knew he was close enough that I could just use my single pin, put it on him, and let it rip.
Right.
And but I tried to I got greedy and I wanted to get one more look to see exactly where he was at. And so I kind of tried to peek through the grass a little bit, and he saw me, and that was it. and took off.
Yeah, they don't give you a whole lot of opportunities like that in a situation like that.
No. And so, but it was cool because that was really the first I saw like a shooter last year, but it was like, I presume it was the Stat King last year that, I mentioned the name, I have to beep that out. Dear beep.
Does anybody else call him Stat King? I don't know. Maybe not. Oh, yeah.
Just the big
Double
Big
bleep.
10.
Double bleep.
Double bleep at this mark. I'm gonna have to mark it on the thing so when I edit it, then I know where the beeps are. But yeah, I thought I saw that deer last year.
Referred to him on this podcast as the Mark Jury buck. How's that?
Or we just call him the King. You know what I mean? We just call him the King.
That's good.
I thought I saw him, and then I'm pretty sure it was him because that was the deer I thought was making that sign. And so, I mean, technically, I guess he was the first shooter buck that I had seen there, but like I didn't get a real good look. It was more of like, think it's him. I'd say I was like 70% sure it was him. But this was the first like shooter buck that I saw like with like shooting light that was like a good buck. So it felt like I was making the progression, right? The first 2 years was like scouting some like hunts where I saw like some scrubby bucks and a spike and some does and stuff like that. And then this was the third year, and it's like I was in an area where I was finding like buck sign and finally saw like a shooter, and shooting.
Well,
light.
and I think it's cool because we've put in, well, especially you, but we put in a lot of miles up there, just doing a lot of scouting or whatever. And I think it's kind of cool because you've been saying like all summer, like this year I'm going out there every weekend, and you actually got like this year you actually did it. Like you got up there early. Like way earlier than you've hunted it really in the past. Yeah. And you did. You actually had some pretty good hunts early on out there, I would say.
Yeah, and it's not a place that hunts easy early either.
No.
And so I was going up just expecting to take losses until, around last week of October, before I was leaving for Kansas. That was really my plan for the season. I was like, go ahead.
It really sets up better for like November kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so I was pretty much planning to take L's for the most part and just trying to learn some stuff to set myself up to take off a couple days the last week of October in the middle of the week. That way I could hunt the weekend and then maybe like Monday, try to maybe take a Friday so I could hunt Friday or half day so I could hunt like an evening Friday, all day Saturday, scout Sunday, then hunt Monday, Tuesday, and then, take Monday, Tuesday off. And that was kind of what my plan was going in for the season because – in which I was going to give up all the hunting basically around me locally, which was fine, but I was going to hunt like the one spot that I really, really liked that I have had great encounters the past 2 years. And for 3 years, I've had like bucks with opportunities in this spot. And I've just wanted to kill a deer in this spot really bad. And I knew I was going to take off a day between the 16th and 18th, whatever day I got the right wind and the right weather, I was going to take a day off during the middle of the week to hunt that spot. And otherwise I was going to be in the North Piece the whole time. That was kind of the plan for the year.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of cool because you actually like last year, this same area you killed a doe in last year, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So last year you was really the first time that you've had, got to use your kayak and, do some arrow flinging and slaying.
Yeah.
But I think it was pretty cool because that's another thing that you've really worked on is like you're somebody who always pays so much detail and attention to your access and that kind of thing. So I think that was, it was cool last year to see you really put the pieces together. But in this piece that you're talking about, you actually we've talked about you getting beat a lot by bucks in there, whether it be by wind or like, maybe the brush just didn't give you enough opportunity and they just kind of moseyed off after some time. But I think I think the access is something you pay so much attention to. So did you do anything different for access this year?
No, like, cause the access into this spot is like, I'm not messing much up, if anything. Just from hunting it enough times, like I've seen how the deer kind of come. The hardest thing about this particular area is that the deer kind of come from almost any direction. Yeah. And so you got to give something up. But the way I come in is the least likely area that deer are going to spend any time, right? Like it's just like when you see like where the trails are and stuff, when you scout it, there's one area they're going to come out that I'm going to have to cross, and that's it. But when I come in, I can kind of veer off to my west a little bit, because nothing ever comes from the west behind me. The only thing that ever comes from behind me, or that I would have to cross a trail, would come from my east, essentially, right? And so as long as I kind of loop out to my west just a little bit, and when I say loop out, I'm talking like 30 yards. I'm not talking like I'm going like an extra ridge or something like that. It's just enough to where if anything comes out from my east and wants to come straight across behind me, that they're not catching my boot track like before I get an opportunity to potentially get a shot, right?
Right.
Unless they're so close to my tree that I'm going to get into that they're crossing it within like 10 yards or something like that. You know what I mean? Because then it's like I'm making my way into my tree, and so then it's, there's not much I can do at that point. So the access is pretty well bulletproof from that standpoint. As long as I play the wind right in there, it's like I've never been winded in there by anything that came out that wasn't behind me, that didn't get. I think I've only been winded in there one time, and it was a doe, and she was literally 5 yards like directly below me, and I think it was an overcast day, because usually the way this place kind of sets up is like it's kind of open. It's a swampy area, right? And so in this area, it stays kind of damp, not wet, but just damp enough to where it's like all swamp grass, and a lot of the trees in there are dead and have fallen down, and so it's like real low kind of shrubs, like just scrubby swamp brush, right? And then just like swamp grass everywhere that's like up to your like hips maybe, right? In the summer. This time of year it starts to fall down. It might be like mid-thigh high. And then just like almost like it reminds you, like when you walk into it, I remember the first time I walked into it in the off season, when the first time I found it, it reminded me of like pictures of being in Texas almost. Because it was just like all this like mesquite looking brush, just like shitty brush patches everywhere. And at that time, like the grass is like completely dead and on the ground, and so it seems really, really open. But when you get in there in the summer or early fall, there's plenty of cover around, especially when you've got leaves on. In like late November, things drop, it gets pretty open in there. But the reason why it's somewhat bulletproof is like, especially if you get like a bluebird day, like where that tree is at, when I have leaves, I have some cover around me to get drawn. Whenever I don't, like you're kind of naked in this tree inside. There's another tree I would actually hunt whenever like the leaves come off. It's like 25 yards away. But when you have a nice bluebird day that's sunny, that swamp grass and everything just kind of heats up. And once you get enough sunlight, man, your thermals are shooting kind of straight up in the air. And so I've had like the wrong wind for certain deer coming in, to where it's like if they come in midday, I was beating them alone on my thermals. Like not the prevailing wind, because they were using the prevailing wind coming in and it was in their face. But because of the time of day they came in, I was beating them with the thermal. And so that's kind of why I love that spot, because like I hunted on the right wind and I'm bulletproof. And then if the wind switches partway through the day and it starts to swirl or whatever, as long as it's sunny out, then I'm pretty much bulletproof until the sun starts dropping again.
Cool. I have like at least two things on that, because I think that's something a lot of people are just starting to learn or not learning. I think the one thing that we always forget is like everybody got really into kind of like the public land craze kind of thing, and are learning about thermals because Dan Infalt really made not that they weren't like a thing before that, like plenty of people talked about it, but in the last, like, we'll say 7 years, more
common knowledge. If you will.
It became more common knowledge. Like, thermals. Like, there's maybe two wind directions depending on what if there's not a steady wind. And I feel like we always forget to explain the basics of thermals, because people are like, oh, it's almost like a series. Like when you read articles now, they'll just mention like, oh, use the thermals, but they don't explain what thermals are, which is just the air current moving up or down. So if it's hot, they're going up. If it's cold, they're going down.
Yeah, relationship to the temperature. Like,
right. Very, very basic.
Yeah.
But the key thing is knowing where you can trick them. So the swamp grass that you're talking about, anything that's got water, especially later in the season, usually the water ends up retaining some heat, or it gets really, really cold. Like if you got ice on water or something like that. So you're going to either have a pushing or pulling away from the water. So water will directly affect your thermals if you're hunting close enough to it. And I think that is feeling bulletproof in a tree stand, I'm sure you have plenty of confidence when you're sitting in a stand when your thermals are going straight up like that.
Yeah, I typically don't. I typically don't have any worries in this particular spot. Like when I go in, and because I make sure to hunt it just on the. I need anything that has I can hunt anything that's a north, and I can hunt anything that's a west. I can't hunt any other wind directions, but anything that's north, northeast, northwest, or a direct west wind, I can hunt. The west wind becomes a little trickier. That I definitely have to rely on the thermal, either it going up or the water, close behind me. Especially like in the morning, whenever you get like a nice cold morning, but maybe it's like early October, like it was for this year, where I had a nice cold morning, but the water temp hadn't changed because it hadn't been consecutively cold enough to really drop the water temperature, the water that I was using. Yeah. And so like I'll get a little kind of like almost like fake north wind, like if it's a cold morning, just for that thermal to kind of start to pull back toward the water that I just came off of. You know what I mean? So it's like you just have to kind of, and it can be as complicated or as easy as you want to make it, but like just from being in that spot so many different times and hunting it on different winds until I kind of started figuring it out, like I know now what I can get away with in that spot.
So we're gonna flip to the north piece, and we're gonna pretend that I don't know anything about it. Is there areas there that you're going to use? Really, there's not a lot of there's not. I mean, there's swamps, but they're different there, right? Like they're not like we'll just say they're isolated swamps. It's not like it's not like a swamp with a body of water attached to it or something.
Right.
So they're a little different. But are you using water there to manipulate your thermals or kind of trick them?
Not on any of the setups that I've had to this point. I would say like the hunting there at this point has been more like true kind of like mountain hunting just in general, like using the thermal in relationship to how things might change based on the elevation change that you might be experiencing, right? That would be kind of how I would think about it. Now, I always think about, in those scenarios, I think about like less water, right? And more like open areas, right? Like, cause I can think of like two different spots in my mind now. One that's on this mountain where it's like you get like these little pockets of like where it opens up a little bit, and those are great kind of little setups because a couple different things kind of come together there, and it does get wet, so it does get swampy, and which is like that's why there's nothing there, and it might only be like a 20-yard area that's kind of open or whatever that they're going to travel through, and I would use that to my advantage, like just because like I've got an open canopy above that to where like that spot on the mountain will actually get warm. And so it will give me some help with my thermals, at least, shoot them straight up in the air a little bit, or loft it out over, something if I'm going to try to cheat the wind a little bit. The other area is kind of similar to that, but it's almost more like the swamp that I was hunting locally. And it's because like it has some areas where you might set up, it's just, it's way more open because it holds more moisture and has killed like the grass and stuff like that. And so it plays out a lot more similarly, but I'm just not using the water to kind of add to like the thermal advantage, if you will. Okay.
What about?
That's not true. There is a stream that I have used actually last year. I have used that, but that's moving water. And that was only one hunt. But yeah, I have used that in the past too. But
so let's pretend I do know about it. Is that the stream I think it is? Yeah. Where I found that shed a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I think that would be. Based on what we found in there, like it might be wide enough that the wind wouldn't swirl in there, and even if it did, I think that water is really cold.
So
it would probably it would suck with that creek.
Is. So where I set up initially, I was screwed because I got too far away, and then where I set up a second time, I stayed closer to that lip, like that you come out of that water over that little lip. Staying closer to that because you've got some hemlocks. It's cooler in general, and then you've got the cold mountain water behind you, and then I was able to definitely play the thermal there. But setting up right off that lip, I was still also kind of out of the game of where I wanted to be based on like where all the sign was at.
Sure, because we haven't really found a good crossing there yet.
Yeah, and that's a tough spot to hunt. Like I've talked to some guys about that try to hunt bottoms like that, and it's just like unless you have the setup to where you can just be so close and on top of that lip to get that thermal draw, You know, like if you get anywhere too far up above it, it just swirls and you're screwed. Now I did hunt on the ground in there one day, and I did have a buck within like 20 yards, just like a young buck. But you know, so I was able to beat. I mean, I kept my wind clean for him, but I think I just got lucky and it just didn't have a whole lot of wind that day, just in general.
Yeah,
you know. So
right. So what was anything different? You said the food was a little bit different because fields were different. You got a lot of acorns up with you this year?
No. So the funny thing is like I went in and checked like some cameras in this one area close to where I killed that buck, and there were acorns in there last year, and there weren't any this year. And truthfully, it's like I checked a couple spots over the summer and I just didn't see anything. There was one spot, I'm trying to even remember where it was at, that I was scouting, and I remember where it was at, and I found some acorns, but I ended up not even getting there to that area, and it's nowhere close to where I ended up hunting on the 16th anyway. But this was just one of those years where locally where I just knew I just wasn't going to have the opportunity to spend a lot of time like in those places because I probably wasn't going to hunt them, but once, maybe twice, you know, I was planning like that week of the 16th to the 18th. Like I took 2 days off that week. I took the 16th off and I took the 18th off because 18th was the exact day that I had encounters the previous 2 years in that same exact spot with two different bucks that I ended up getting beat by. And so I took those 2 days off because they had the right wind for me to hunt those that was historically aligned to the same winds that I had when I had seen those two bucks the 2 years prior.
Yeah. You really did have similar conditions to those, and those deer didn't wind you, right? They just didn't give you shot opportunities.
Yeah, the first one was he came in from the west. And that was really, I think it was just the second year that I hunted that area, and I had a trail camera in there, and so a lot of the deer were actually coming from the north and the east, and so I had assumed that was kind of like, and I had scouted back in there, and it's like it's super thick. There's a lot of buck sign back in that area. I'm kind of like on the edge of it, you know, and I had assumed that that's like where they might be staging. You know, I don't think that they were bedding there because I think that primary scrape is there because of doe bedding. Well, I know it is.
Right.
And I had assumed that they were just kind of staging in that general area and spending time in there and then moseying through to check that scrape and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I learned the following year that actually bucks are bedding right off that scrape. Like they're bedded not far away because I watched one bed 40 yards from me. You know, but anyway, to finish the first year, I just had a buck sneak in on me, and by the time I realized he was there and that he was one of the ones I was interested in, I just didn't have any more cover between he and I for me to get drawn.
That's right.
Yeah. And then last year I just had one come in and bed like 40 yards from me, and I watched him for like 2 hours.
I was going to say it was like 2 or 3 hours. I remember you being like, he's not leaving. Let's go here.
I mean, in hindsight, I should have got down and tried to stalk him because I had plenty of wind that day to do it, but I just didn't. I thought for sure he would get up and make his way toward me. He just never did. But yeah, so like I had good encounters in that spot, you know, on almost the identical conditions, you know, 2 years prior.
So for this, for your hunt of hunts this year, so you chose the day to go in because it was like historical. You took the days off because it was historical data that you kind of collected over time. Historical
data, and truth be told, I felt like the 18th would probably be better because I had debated not hunting the 16th. But it was going to start to warm up just a little bit, like as the week went on, and I was like, I was like, you know, and like the thing is like I had encounters with those deer on the 18th 2 years in a row, but I know just from watching trail camera data in that spot, like it's basically the 15th through the 20th, you know, is like there's going to be action, you know, in there, and because I got a image of this is the benefit of running trail cameras year round. Like I had a hypothesis that there was an early doe in there. That was my hypothesis because like the activity would just go bananas like the week of the 15th through the 20th. And so before, I guess it was not this past spring, but the spring prior, I got an early fawn drop on that camera and was able to backdate it basically to like, she had to be bred like the week of the 15th to the 20th, like for her to drop when she dropped. And so that told me that, and like, if you know anything about doe families, they pass their estrus state onto their doe fawns. And so, and if you know anything about doe families, they stay together unless something drastically changes. They typically don't change like their bedding areas. And so as long as that doe family stays in that area, there's always going to be an estrus date that's going to land around that same time frame into perpetuity until like they don't use that area anymore. And so that's what I've been basing a lot of this off of, and why I've been watching it. So when I was trying to think of the day, I was like, well, it's this week and the 18th is the day, but it's going to start to warm up just a little bit. I was like, in Friday or Monday morning, just had real nice cold temps where it felt like the first like nice little like cold snap. And I was like, this could be the thing, you know? And I like October mornings, you know, like that's one of the things I like. It's like one of my favorite times to hunt is October mornings.
Yep.
And it was, the weather wasn't great. I think for the weekend, if I'm not mistaken, like I think I'm almost positive.
I think that was one of the only days that we had that was nice.
Yeah. Cause I'm pretty sure it rained like all Saturday. Cause I remember I went up to the north piece, I think. And that was the Saturday that it rained like crazy. Right. And so we just came off of like really shit weather, you know, and it was going to be nice and cold Monday morning. So my thing was like, nobody was probably out Friday or Saturday because the weather was so bad. And so I was like, Monday, they're going to be acting like it's midweek because they're going to have been relieved from pressure since about Thursday.
Yep.
You know, and so that was the rationale for going in on Monday, where I was like, they should be calm because no one has hunted them for the past 2 or 3 days or been in that piece of public even probably for the past 2 or 3 days. I was like, you know, it feels like it's going to be pretty clean, and it's going to be right after, you know, rain has stopped, and, you know, the temperatures are going to be good. And I was like, you know, that feels like a good day. And so that was really kind of the rationale for it.
Yeah. So I really just want to jump into the story, but you're kind of like, you know, you're like, you know, do the nonchalant thing. Remember you sent, so we have 4 of us that have a group text, and we get a text from Clint. It's just a picture of a deer and says tagged out. No picture of Clint, nothing. Just a picture of a dead deer and tagged out. That's all it said. So you can be a little less nonchalant about it. Like pretend like Steve Rinella is interviewing you right now and be like a little. Let's hear the story, man. I haven't read. I mean, you told me little bits and details, and we talked on the phone a little bit, but I want to hear all the nitty gritty.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's one of those things where that arrow getting released was really, you know, in the making, like the past 2 to 3 years in that spot specifically. You know what I mean? Because like there wasn't a lot of like, and I mentioned this in my Instagram post, like the strategy really at the end of the day was it's a known community scrape that is active year round, that these dates within this like 3 to 5 day window have historically been right, you know? And so even if you took away all the other factors, I was going to be in there one of those 3 days, you know, and that was the plan. So, you know, I took one day off, because of all the stuff I just mentioned. I thought it'd be pretty clean and a nice little temp drop. Didn't think there'd be any people in there on a Monday, or just in general. I never see people in this spot, but just like in the ancillary areas around it.
Right.
You know, the other kind of added thing was like loading the kayak into the truck to get there and stuff like that was kind of a bitch because I've been dealing with like a shoulder injury and stuff like that. So that was actually my biggest concern of the whole trip was like, or the whole hunt was like getting the boat literally in and out of the truck, you know, basically kind of one-armed. And then if I killed something, like, you know, being by myself, and there's no way to drag this thing out. Like it has to go out by boat. And so I got to get him loaded into the boat. I got to get him back to the truck and then everything back into the bed of the truck myself. Right. You know? So that was like the biggest concern was like, I don't know if my shoulder can do it. So I get there in the morning. And I was the particular tree that I'd almost like, so there were 2 different trees I picked out when I went in this off season just to kind of scope some stuff out. Cause I wanted to see how that buck beat me the last time where he was bedded. And so I picked 2 different trees out. And so that was kind of like the biggest thing, like walking in there, like the night before was thinking about like, what tree am I going to get into? Because I had a northwest wind in order to hunt the tree that I really thought I was going to get into. A northwest wind was going to be bad for me for anything coming from the west. No, it'd be okay from the west. But I was going to have my scent blown across like the primary trail that I thought that deer typically go to and toward the scrape. But where I thought deer were going to come from, where they have come from historically, I would get a shot opportunity before they would have gotten there. Right. And so I was kind of on the fence. Right. And I was like, when I got out of the boat and I got kind of into the area that I wanted to hunt, I was standing at the tree that I typically hunt and was looking at the tree that I had planned to hunt. And I was like looking around and I just kind of looked up, because there's a tree that's like close to me. It's like a scrubby tree and it loses its leaves pretty quickly. And I just happened to glance up and look and I'm like, oh man, it's still holding its leaves. I'm like, okay, I'm hunting this tree then because I have all the cover I need to my left. And that's usually that's how I've gotten beat by that one buck, was off to my left because that tree had lost its leaves.
It had no cover. Okay.
Yeah. And so it had some leaf cover still on it. So I was like, I was like, cool, I'm going to get into this tree then. And I was like, I'm probably going to regret it because I've gotten beat twice out of this tree. So I get in that tree, get all set up. It's, I hadn't had many hunts this year. And so it was a little bit of a rodeo getting into the tree as it typically is. And there's this one branch, and I've hunted this tree enough. It's like, you think I'd figured out like a plan. But there's this one branch that always gives me trouble, because it's like I have to set my platform up close to it, and so it's like I'm either like I can't get over top of it because there's like a big knot and the tree splits, and so I can't get my tether that high, and so I got to kind of just be like right below it, and if I get it too low, then my feet get stuck on it underneath of it, and it's just like. So I'm trying to wrestle with that, and I finally get it set up, and get my platform set up. I get into the tree, get all my stuff hung, and I'm sitting there, in the dark. And I was set up by like a little after 6. Daylight's at like 7. Text my wife, let her know I'm in the tree, and I'm just sitting there thinking, I'm thinking back to like the previous hunts and stuff like that. And while I'm sitting in this tree, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, you're gonna be so pissed if a buck comes in and beds in that same spot as he did last year, and you're not in that other tree. Like, you're gonna be so mad. Like, you can't. I'm like talking myself out of being in the tree that I'm in. I'm like, you should have hunted that tree. Like, you came in this off season, you picked out 2 other trees that were probably the better options. That'll give you the opportunities over in that area.
We've all been there.
And I'm like, yeah. And so I'm kind of already kicking myself, like thinking like, this probably isn't going to end well for me. And so I'm sitting there and like, it's just like, getting to gray light. And I start just hearing like some scuffling, like off to my right. And the only place I really don't want deer coming out is like behind me and to my right. Is the only place I don't want deer coming from, because that's the spot that I'm completely naked. That's like basically the spot that I give up. Like, if they come out over there, it's going to be tough because I have to get turned around and take a weak side shot at best, or I have to let them get completely behind me, and I have to turn all the way around to take like a strong side type of shot, but directly behind me. But I got to get turned with no cover, right?
Right.
So it's getting to be about gray light. Start hearing some scuffling. Squirrels are dropping, walnuts and bullshit. I can hear it hitting the ground. But I just you can only whenever you're like hearing squirrels and then you hear something, it's like you're like, I don't think that's a squirrel. You know what I mean? Like, it just sounds heavier, sounds bigger. Yeah. And so I could hear this and it just doesn't sound like a squirrel playing around, but I can't see anything yet because off to my right there's a couple like cedars, and then there's just like a wall of shit. Like, it's just like 10 feet high, nothing but vines, brush, and just like, there's a few little like 1 or 2 little deer trails you can see that they kind of get in, that they wiggle their way into there.
Right.
And so I'm sitting there and I can kind of hear like the leaves rustling, and now it's like 5 after 7. So you can see now, you know what I mean? Like, it's still like, it's shooting light, put it that way. But you still like, you can't see super far yet. And I can see like the face of a deer. So I'm like, oh, cool, it's a deer, right? And can't tell what it is yet because its head's still kind of like in the brush. And then turns his head, and I can see like the right side. And I'm like, all right, cool. I was like, he's got 3 on that side. I'm like, all right. And he turns his head the opposite way, and I'm like, okay, he's got 3 on that side. And I was like, I'm pretty sure he has brow tines on both sides. I was like, all right, cool. I was like, I think it's an 8-point. And so I'm just kind of sitting there watching him. At this point, in my mind, I was like, I'm probably not going to shoot him. Now, mind you, I had a cell camera in here this year. Batteries died, and so I have no clue what's in here. Like, it was a nice like little bit of a relief this year to not have like a deer that I was like following locally, at least. You know what I mean? That I had no clue what I was going to run into, and so
it's kind of fun that way sometimes.
It is, man. And I talked a lot to Tony this year, Peterson, our buddy Tony Peterson, about like like bringing the joy back into hunting. And sometimes like the unknown is kind of how you do it. And just shooting, letting arrows go like when you're excited and just deer hunting, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. And I've been trying to really stay true to that. Cause I can get myself worked up into like a place where I start to like, not like what I'm doing as much as I should.
Yeah.
And so I can see both sides and like, I know what he is now. And I'm like, and at first I'm like, I'm going to let him go, and so I'm watching him and I'm pretty sure I'm going to pass him. And then he comes out to this tree that's just like, he's coming out to my right and from behind me where I don't want him to come from. Right. Mm-hmm. He comes out to this tree and like, if I'm going to shoot, which I kind of made up my mind that I wasn't going to, like, this is the opportunity because he's out now in the open enough. It's probably about a 25 yard. Actually, I think I ranged it at one point. It was like 27 yards. And he starts making a scrape and he's raking a tree and he's got his antlers in the leaves and he's shaking it and he's pawing the ground. And he stops and he takes a piss and he's like pounding his foot and he's like, he's getting fired up. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I'm getting fired up. And like, as soon as he was doing all that stuff, I was like, yeah, I'm going to kill you now. I'm like, that's all there is to it. I was like, buddy, you just sealed your fate. If I can get a shot, I'm going to shoot you. Cause it was just like, I got caught up in like the moment of it where it was just like, it just like, I was just enjoying myself. You know what I mean? Where I was just like, dude, I love watching deer do that. I've never had a deer come out and do that where I actually got a shot opportunity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like for the story to kind of like be like fulfilled, if you will. Right. And so, but at this point though, he stops and he has his head out of the leaves and he's looking in my direction. So I can't get turned to shoot. Right. And so I'm like, all right, awesome. I'm like, you're such a dumbass. It's like when you decide like, yeah, you're going to shoot him, like you've already missed your opportunity. So he starts walking behind me and I'm watching him, side eyeing him until like I can't anymore. And he's directly behind me now. And my wind's good. It's going to be good until he gets like about to my like, probably like 8 o'clock, if you will, 7:30, like 7:30, 8 o'clock. Right. And I can hear him walking behind me. Then all of a sudden I just hear him stop. Like he stops walking. Right. And every step was like in that swamp grass where it was like crunch, 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 crunch. And like, and all of a sudden it just stopped. And so, and based on like how I could hear it, it's like, he was like now directly behind me.
Right.
And I'm like, shit. I'm like, all right. I'm like, I know there's a bush right behind me with like a bunch of greenbrier all over it. That's at about 10 yards. And I'm like, if he's behind that, I might be able to get turned around. I was like, if he's not, I'm completely screwed. I was like, but I got to at least try to turn my head real slow and see, like, try to get some peripheral vision on him and to see like exactly where he's at to see, or I'm going to have to let him get past me and hope I still have a shot once he gets past me a little bit and that my wind doesn't screw me. Because I'm definitely not getting any of the thermal effect of it shooting up yet because it's still, not light enough.
Kind of dark. Yeah.
Yeah. So I first saw him at like 7:05 and I watched him for a while. And so I start turning to my left, kind of try to side eye him. And I finally get to a point to where I can see him. I'm like, no shit, he's behind that bush. Like, and his head's kind of behind it. And I'm like, he probably can't see me. Right. And so I get turned around, but now he's behind the bush where I don't have a shot. Right. And so, and I'm trying to figure out like, and the reason why he stopped there is that's my marker when I walk in. Remember I was telling you, like, I kind of work to the west to not walk across any deer trails. And then I kind of come back to my tree. Yeah. And and that bush is usually my marker where when I get to a certain spot and I can kind of make that bush out with my headlamp or whatever, then I know I need to kind of beeline it right over and I'm not crossing any other deer trails. And I know I'm like right behind my tree to hop in. Right.
Yep.
And so he stopped right behind that bush because that's where my boot track was. He was just like, boom. And he stopped.
Checking it out.
He's just standing there. Yeah. He's I can see him licking the air and stuff like that. And I'm like, I thought for sure I was going to get busted. My wind was fine, but I thought he was just like, he wasn't sure what it was,
Right.
And so I'm like, I just need him to take like a step, and wouldn't you know it, like he didn't like take a step like he was going to walk any further. He just kind of repositioned himself. And when he did, I could see just enough over that bush to where I could see his right front shoulder. And so now his head was out past the bush, so where now he could see me if he wanted to, right? And I still haven't drawn yet because I didn't know which direction he was going to go or whatever. And so now I'm like, I need him to turn his head, right? And so for whatever reason, he turned his head away from me for like a split second. And as soon as he did, I drew. And then I put the pin on him. I didn't even range him. I knew he was within like 10 to 15 yards. I shoot a single pin at 26 yards. So if I hold center mass, I'm going to hit a little high when they're close, which is what I want because I have steep angle. So my exit hole should be good. And so I just basically, put it roughly center mass behind his shoulder, or what I thought was behind his shoulder, but Way had his kind of legs position. It was actually on his shoulder. And I let it rip. Heard the crack, heard the pop that you want to hear, and he wheeled and took off. And then it was all of about 15 seconds, and I heard just like a crash, and I assumed he was down. But you always have that doubt right away where you're like, because I'm like, oh man, did I hit him high? Did I hit him high?
Right.
Man, I hope I didn't hit him high,
I feel like that's everybody's anxiety after a shot is kind of like, oh, was it good? Was it not good?
Yeah,
especially
100%.
in low light conditions like that too.
Yeah. And I had planned because it was like 7:15 now, when I actually let it rip.
Okay.
So I spent like 10 minutes with him. And I waited a little bit. Like I didn't get out of the tree right away. Like I assumed I heard him crash, but I was like, if I wait an hour or 45 minutes or whatever it is, like he's not going to be any less dead when I find him,
Right.
So sat there, composed myself for a minute, and then it was one of those things where it's like the shot was, from my recollection, was good enough. Not when I say good enough, like in my memory, it felt right to where my day hunting was done. That either that deer was dead where I heard him crash, where I thought I heard him crash, or it was going to be a day spent trying to find him. You know what I mean?
Right.
So with that, it's like I pulled all my stuff out of the tree, slowly kind of wrapped up all my stuff, let my bow down, put everything down, rappelled out of the tree, gathered all my stuff at the bottom of the tree and just kind of like packed it all up and stuff like that. And I think by the time like I shot to the time I did that was like 45 minutes to an hour. But the bitch was like, I found my arrow right away, had good blood on it. But this swamp grass is all red. And so I saw blood at like the impact site. And then I saw a couple spots, like another spot. And then from there, it was hard as hell for me to find any blood. And so I spent probably like 25 minutes trying to find specks, in red grass, essentially.
Yeah. Right.
And so then I started getting worried because I was like, man, I can't find like consistent blood. Like there isn't enough, like it's all red in here and I'm not seeing enough like to like legit blood trail. And so I basically went to the area that the tree he passed to get into the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, let me just step into the timber. And I heard him like fall like just a little north of me. I was like, and let me see if maybe I can just find him. Maybe I can just see him. And so I stepped in there real quick and I basically looked to my left and I just saw a white belly laying there, like at 20 yards further up. You know what I mean? And so that was a huge relief where I was like, shit. I was like, yes, like, all right, I'm not going to spend the day looking for him. And then I walked up and grabbed him. He piled up like 40 yards from where I was at. So he wasn't going to actually make it to that scrape that I was hunting around, but that's, why he was in that area. He was just browsing, munching food, making his own scrape, checking on shit. And I was stoked because it's been a several year project to try to kill a buck and get him in that, in that area and put him in a boat. And that's all I've wanted to do since I found that spot.
I think it's so cool, man. And I think, I listened to the podcast that you did with Cody DeQuisto. That dropped last a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
But I think the thing that you mentioned in that whole story, the coolest things for me, there's a lot of cool elements to it, but I think the cool thing is like you just had a good time. Like,
loved it.
I agree. Like the camera thing is awesome. Like it's cool to kill a buck that's on camera, and I think they're great tools, especially if you're just learning an area. But I think there's there's really something to be said, and I think more people are noticing it, is like sometimes it is just better to go into a spot that well and just have a good time, like just hunting and reading the sign and knowing the wind and the access element to, your access, you've been telling me about that spot now since we've been friends. And I think that's one of the coolest things about this hunt is just the fun that you got to have doing it, and the execution of it is next to flawless.
Yeah, it was nice to get the monkey off my back because that place has been beating me up the past couple years, And that's all I've wanted to do since I found that spot was like kayak a buck out of that place. And so I killed a doe in that same exact spot. So the funny thing was I shot this buck in the exact same spot where I shot that doe. I mean, they were standing almost in the identical spots. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. And so it was almost like she gave me a dry run the year before, to figure it out. He was a little bit more of a bitch getting out of there because he died in a worse spot. Like she literally ran to like an area that I let her there, and I actually like went and got my boat and like paddled up to her and like just threw her in.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, him not so much. Like he ran
to
like
drag him out a little bit.
It was like he just ran and died in like a mess of shit. That like I had to basically like crawl on my knees to get to. It was like it was not fun getting him out, and that was part of like what I wanted to enjoy about that was like. A lot of, I've killed bucks in the past in October, but not many in the morning. Like a lot of the deer that I have killed have been in the evenings, or like midday, if you will. Right. Like, and if I think real hard, like, there was other ones in the morning, but like not often do I get to kill one in the morning. And I've wanted to recently because I wanted to be able to just spend the day and enjoy it. Like to where it's like I'm not rushing to try to find him because it's getting dark and I'm not going to be able to see blood and like and that whole stress of it. Like the stress was a little bit because I couldn't see the blood very well because of where I shot him at. Like geographically where I shot him at because the shot was great. Like his heart has an imprint of I don't work with these guys at all, but I was shooting a tooth of an arrow broadhead and it has an imprint of a tooth of an arrow. Inch broadhead, like the insignia is straight through his heart. Like it couldn't have been any better. It was through his right shoulder, down through down through his heart, out his left armpit, and then it went through his left leg. So it's like you couldn't have got a better shot. And he was dead on his feet. Like that was an adrenaline run. That 40 yards that he ran. But the coolest part for me was that I got it to do it that early in the morning, like 7:15, right? So I had the entire day, right? So it's like, I took my time getting him out. I mean, I got to him quick and got him gutted because it was cool in the morning, but I knew it was going to start to warm up a little bit during the day. And I took my time getting to him, getting him out. I just enjoyed it. I didn't rush, got him to the boat, got him loaded, which that was a little bit of a rodeo, because I got to put the boat in the truck and then I got to get the buck up into the truck and then into the boat, but I got a cap on my truck. So it's like I got to squat down to do it the whole time. It was a little bit of a mess. And it was a little bit of a rodeo, like kayaking him out because like the weight wasn't completely balanced. And so it was a little dicey coming out,
Yeah. And bucks are a lot bigger than does. It doesn't matter. Really what age class of buck it is. They're heavier than does. They're just different.
Yeah. So I got to do all that. And then I came home and, because I had the whole day, it's like I got him hung up and got him skinned out and, cut up. And I enjoyed a Genesee beer and a cigar while I did it.
Little Genesee.
Little Genesee and all of a cigar. Yeah. While I was taking care of him. And so it was just like one of those things that had some good tunes on. And it was just like, man, this is like that day was why you deer hunt. That was it. I mean, the only thing that would have made it better if it would have had like a buddy or two around or something like that just to kind of hang out with. But, it's the middle of it's Monday. So like guys are working and stuff like that. So it wasn't like I was bummed out. But aside from that, like I couldn't ask for a better day, a better hunt, do it where I've wanted to do it for the past couple years, get to use my kayak, the water always adds some adventure and you just feel, I don't know, man, like that kayaking stuff and like kayaking into hunt and kayaking one out, like you just feel connected, it's like you just feel fulfilled. And like I mentioned that in the Instagram post I made, like my cup was full that day. Actually, it was running over that day, and then it just fired me up for Kansas, man. Like, cause I was like, I got the monkey off my back in PA to where it's like, I don't have a tag in my pocket when I come home. So I'm not in Kansas thinking about like, when the trip's winding down, but man, I still got a tag in my pocket for Pennsylvania too. It's like, now it's just like, almost feel like I'm on Easy Street. And like, I feel like the hunt in Kansas is going to be killer. Cause I'm like, I already got one in the book. Right. And so I'm going to be able to go out there and just like, let it fly, dude, and be aggressive. Cause I'm not like, I want to at least fill one tag. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I already did that this year. So like now I can just go out and let it rip.
It's so true, man. Cause my buddy Jared and I were talking yesterday and he's like, this is the first time I've killed a buck in 5 years. And man, it's like, it's like a weight is lifted. We both work together, and we both have off. We took the same vacation days this year. We have like 10 days off or whatever. And he's like, I shot this thing 2 days into our vacation, but it feels really good. Like I feel no stress or pressure, and I'm just gonna go have fun shooting does now. Like, And I think that's one hard thing for out of state stuff is like, well, like kill one in my home state. Like it's cool killing deer in your home state, And it's hard here. It's really hard here.
Yeah,
it's hard everywhere. Like deer are just hard animals to kill, but it's different.
Yeah, they're hard to kill, and in this area, especially locally, like there's just a ton of pressure around here. Like that's, always a challenge in this particular area. Even on that piece, like even though I have like a slick access to it and stuff like that, I know there's guys hunting like around the area that I'm hunting. They just can't quite get into the spot that I'm in. Because I've seen their stands, and I've seen like their marker tape and stuff like that. So I know that they're in there at different times. Yeah. But it's just, I was stoked to get it done there. That spot's going to be good always, it's like, so it's just a really like gem little spot. And it's such a cool spot to hunt. Like the scene's cool. Like how deer kind of come in, like they're so comfortable in that spot. Like every deer I've seen in there, like I've never seen deer run through there ever. Like even when I come back and I've hunted like the week of Thanksgiving, in this particular spot, I'm special regs unit, so I can do that. Like I'll come back and hunt like the week of Thanksgiving, and they're still like, even if like the rut is on, right? Like they're still not running. Like they're not getting chased through there necessarily. Like it's just a spot that they're so comfortable, Right. So, but speaking of being comfortable, man, I'm going to think I gotta get to jujitsu and get uncomfortable.
Yeah, I was going to say. So before we go, top 3 tips for water access or canoeing or kayaking. What do you got? Top 3.
Oh man, top 3 tips. Prioritize stability over speed and steerability of your kayak or canoe, whatever you're going to get. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast, I guess, even in kayaking for whitetails. And you want to keep all your shit in your boat. It's always a positive,
It's a positive.
So, yeah. If you can cheat like I do, which is I have a trolling motor, so I don't paddle whenever I'm going to hunt, like because I don't want to be paddling something out.
It's electric, just because motor, like right, not like a pedal.
It's electric, yeah. It's like a 30 pound thrust trolling motor. Not because I'm lazy. It's like I do plenty of stuff that suggests I'm not lazy, but it's the idea of, and the benefit was proven like whenever I was getting that deer out, not just like the weight and stuff like that, but like it's like it's not 100%. Like that deer is not equally distributed, right? And certainly like it's a new canoe F10 is what I use. It's like I don't have any dealings with them, but I'll tell everybody what I'm using. And so it's not huge. And I specifically got one that was smaller so I could fit it in the back of my truck, and I have to have a trailer for it and stuff like that to haul it around. But with that, putting a deer in it does get a little, like it can be, a little bit of a trial and error to figure out how to get it in and get you in it and all your gear in at the same time. And so, the trolling motor is key because I'm not paddling, shifting my body weight back and forth side to side. I just get in, stabilize, and know that like, okay, we're good. Like we're not going to rock the boat here, and then click it on and just like, and steer myself out. Yeah. So that would be the other one. That would be the second kayak one. And then I'll give 4. So this one always safety first. Like if the weather sucks and there's a ton of wind or it's dicey, like just don't do it, and always I wear a life vest every time I get in. And then make sure you have a quick strap, like release shit, like I wear hip waders in, cause there's like, I got to pull the boat in and out some places. That way, if you do happen to fall out, you can ditch your waders really quick. So I'm always mindful of that and how much clothing I'm wearing and how much weight it's going to add if I were to fall in.
Right.
And then the fourth one is, it's just freaking awesome, man. It adds like a little sense of adventure to like hunts that are normal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and so I always recommend people try it. It's like, it can be dicey, in and out in the dark. And I've run into shit and almost flipped the boat before because there was a huge stump that I didn't see. And like I hit it and like, almost launched me. But it just adds, it's an easy way to add some adventure to like some mundane hunts, or things that you take for granted that are maybe local to you or whatever.
Yeah, especially for people that aren't in like super rural areas or something. There's water a lot of places, and I think it is I think it's creative, but it is definitely some kind of super adventure, I think.
Yeah.
But all right, dude. Well, we're gonna let you get you torn and tattered here. But it's awesome catching up, buddy. Miss you.
Miss you too, man. Thanks for having me on, bro. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on anytime, man.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.